Are you ready to uncover your retirement solution? Learn more as Jeremy Keil and his guests guide you along the path of retirement and reveal the 5 steps you need to take to solve your retirement puzzle. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to Retirement Revealed with Jeremy Keil. Today we're going to be talking about leave. And if you're wondering why just one word, well, it's because it's part of a 5-part series, and this is the 5th part. And I'm actually going to let Jeremy go over the first 4 to kind of recap, and then we're going to dive in. Good afternoon, Jeremy. How are you?
Doing very well. How are you doing, Eric?
I am doing fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Great to hear. Yeah.
I'm excited. So this is part 5.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're probably excited about wrapping up here. We're finishing up the 5-part series because there's 5 parts to our retirement income process. Mm-hmm. Retiring is maybe fun, but it'll become more fun if you have a good process to make sure you can stay retired. And the 5 steps in that process, we believe, is figure out, number 1, what is it that you need to spend in retirement? Number 2, what will you be making in retirement? Mm-hmm. Number 3, what do you need set aside in short-term money? Number 4 is what do you want to have set aside for your long-term growth type of money? And the 5th step is what are you going to leave behind?
Mm-hmm. And does everybody want to leave something behind, in your opinion?
Well, you're gonna one way or another. We figure, yeah, you're either going to leave behind some money or you're going to leave behind some bills. And we want to make sure you leave behind a little bit more money than the bills side of things.
True. Very, very good. I'm hoping to leave a couple mysteries for my family to really wonder about.
Yeah.
Just simple things that will drive them crazy for a couple of years.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
So where do we start today with leave?
Yeah, well, let's talk about what happens when you leave behind some money. And a lot of people eventually start looking at this. Usually the older you get, the more likely you start thinking about what I'm going to be leaving behind. And the big word for that is estate. When you leave behind some money or property, whatever it is, that's your estate. And I'm sure we'll get an estate lawyer on for some exact definitions, some exact ideas. But we just thought we'd go through the basics, kind of talk about what we see that people are looking at, and maybe some misunderstandings that they have about estate planning.
All right. So does an estate plan, is that the same thing as a will?
Well, a will is a tool for the estate plan. And
Okay.
again, we'll get a lawyer that tells us, here's what a will is, here's what a trust is, all this kind of stuff. But a lot of times people think estate planning has to do only specifically with that will or what happens when you're leaving behind some money. And in reality, estate planning is talking about what happens to you and your money both before and after you die. It's not just about if you die, it's really about if you can't make decisions. Mm-hmm. If you're not around, you can't make any decisions. But it's not just that. We, unfortunately, just had a couple this past year in a horrible car accident. One of them died. One was in the hospital. And the person who died, that had to do with the estate plan called the executor or a trustee. The person in the hospital needed a POA or a power of attorney. So it's not just about what happens when you die. It's really what happens when you can't make decisions on your own. Estate planning will make sure your family has a clear understanding of how that should be set up for you.
Yeah, and I mean, this really kind of touches on that. I think a common misconception is that estate planning is only for the wealthy. And I just don't think that's correct.
Yeah, you're right. It's only for the wealthy, or it's only for once you get married, have kids. If you're married, you have kids, there might be some things written in the laws that help you out. But if you're 18 and you're not married, who's going to be there to help out with these different things? A year earlier, when you're 17, perhaps the government would look at your parents to help make some decisions. Mm-hmm. You hit that adult age, and they're expecting if something happens where you can't make decisions, you either got to go through the government process or you need to have these estate planning documents in place. So it's not just for the wealthy, it's not just for the old, it's also for the young, or for anyone that happens to have any money or anyone they care about. I'm hoping that's everybody listening today, is you got some money or somebody to care about, hopefully both or any more.
Yeah. So going back to the POA, can you explain that a little bit more in depth?
Yes, the idea of this thing called a POA, that's power of attorney, it's just saying if I can't make decisions, here's somebody that I trusted to make decisions. And of course, there's documents that the lawyers draw up and says you can decide this or decide that. But just an interesting tidbit, and we wanted to talk about some misconceptions people have today, is a lot of people think the POA helps you out when somebody passes on. We'll get people that call in and say, I had my relative died. They had this insurance on the POA. Tell me what I need to know. And unfortunately, we can't talk to them as the POA. The POA ends at death. It's saying, I can't make this decision right now, but I've empowered you to do it. Once you die, the POA is basically not valid anymore. We're talking about who's the executor, who's the trustee at that point in time. So that's why a lot of times when the lawyers are talking about a will or a trust, and they're saying, here's the executor, here's the trustee, they're also asking, who do you want as a POA, a power of attorney, for different things like health care and finances. And another one they always talk about is this thing called the living will, which is basically if I'm still alive and I'm in the hospital, there's different decisions that need to be made. Here's kind of my instructions on what that should look like.
Mm-hmm. 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 All right.
And it's important to make these decisions not lightly. Put some thought into it. We like to joke a lot that usually it's the oldest son that does the money and the youngest daughter that takes care of the payments, takes care of the parents, rather. Mm-hmm. And when we say that, it really hits home. A lot of people, especially in this generation, if you're retiring now and your parents are like 80 years old, that's kind of the mindset a lot of times. So whether you think that's right or not, that's kind of typical that we're seeing right now. And we just encourage you not to do what's typical. Do what you think is going to be best for you and your family. Maybe it is your youngest daughter that has a better financial mind. Well, she ought to be the financial power of attorney. Who cares if she's not the oldest? Who cares if she's not your son, right? There's maybe some times that you kind of go with the convention, or at least what's been convention, and it doesn't quite match up with who's got the best skills to help you out in that area, or maybe even who you feel most comfortable with talking about these certain issues.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a difficult decision, but it's nice to have somebody to kind of bounce those ideas off of. And I know that's what you and your team do, and I'm not just putting that out there as a plug for you, but it really is very, very difficult emotionally to make a lot of these decisions. So I would encourage everybody to listen to this to seek a professional's help and just have that conversation. Don't put it off because it's a hard subject to talk about, or you don't want to play quote unquote favorites. I'm using air quotes on the podcast here, but favorites. Truly, it's what's going to be best for the entire family once you're gone.
That's exactly it. And it's not really just only about the money. A lot of times it's the things, the stuff, right? Grandpa's gold watch, that cabinet that's been in the family for years, whatever the situation is. One thing I got to tell you about my grandma, she's great. And one of the great things that she's done for her kids, she's done this years ago, right? She did this years ago, where all the things that are still in her apartment, like artwork, a clock, grandpa's flag that was used at his funeral, she's got written on the back of it, kind of like a Post-it note, saying, well, this is who's going to get it. And she's told everyone, so there's not going to be any surprises. Yeah. That's going to be huge. Imagine, hopefully it's years from now, but whenever she passes on, the family already knows her decisions. They're going to know this ahead of time without the stress, right? There's no stress. Usually there's not too much stress around the Christmas table and Thanksgiving, right? Mm-hmm. When you've said, well, hey, remember that clock that you really liked? You're going to get that one, but because of that, this piece of artwork, the brother's going to get that. Everyone understands it ahead of time. There's not the stress of, oh my goodness, one of my parents just died recently, when you're going through making these decisions. She's already done that for them. I think that's a great gift she's already given to her kids by doing that.
And I will tell you, it's so funny that you brought that up. Someone in my wife's family went over to, it was my wife's grandmother's house, and this was a daughter-in-law who did this. She went over with her own Post-it notes and walked grandma around and said, oh, this would be great for so-and-so. Oh, so-and-so would like this. Of course, it was only people in her family.
Right.
So before someone tries to do that and take advantage of that situation, I think it would be great to do what it was your grandmother, right?
Yeah, that's what she's done.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then it's her decision, not somebody else coming in and telling you what to do with your stuff. And oh my goodness, that was quite the dramatic event when that did happen. So,
and it's unfortunately it's not rare. You hear this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
all the time.
It's horrible, horrible stuff.
Yeah. So we just want to talk next a little bit about some, I don't know if myths the right words or problems, just things we run into where people have an idea of the way things are going to work and it just doesn't quite match up.
Okay.
A lot of times we're talking to our clients and they say, "Oh, well, I'm leaving everything to my son and he'll split it up." Like, okay, well, he's not legally bound to split it up. If you got 3 kids and you just leave it to the one and say, "Well, here you go, you divide it 3 ways." He's not legally required to, or even if he is a great person that will be bound by that, he might run into some things with the gifting laws or even taxes, right? A lot of times we see people with savings bonds, and if you just leave that all to the one person and they've got to cash it out, that stuff's showing up on their tax return. And they've got to figure out, how do I account for the taxes here? It's not just leave it to the trustee, leave it to the POA, whoever you want to leave it to, your oldest child there, and let them split it up. You got to put some more thought into it. And related that to a little bit too is a lot of people say, "Oh, it's in the will. We got it all written out in the will." Well, the will doesn't really matter too much if the money doesn't get there. A lot of people have brokerage accounts, IRAs, 401ks, life insurances. All these things have beneficiaries. And if it gets split up by the beneficiaries, that has nothing to do with the will. And sometimes that makes life a little bit easier because you just fill out a form and let the company know. But sometimes it makes it more difficult because you think, well, we'll cover that in the will. We'll cover in the will. Well, if hardly any of your money gets to the will, then it's not quite going to match up with what your will happens to say. It's your beneficiaries that will matter the most because that money will be sent out because of the way that you told the company to. The will is kind of for your leftovers. Whatever didn't get sent out by those other methods. Lawyers will create something called a pour-over will. It's just kind of saying, for whatever reason, just whatever's left. Like if we forgot something, let's have a will. But everything else is maybe set up through the beneficiaries or trustees. They still create a will kind of just in case. And that's just really showing, if that's the way that the lawyers are viewing a will, it's kind of the leftovers in a way, or what's getting to the will. It's your beneficiaries that are going to be the ones dividing up a lot of your investments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so difficult because you just never know. Emotions are running high already because someone, you've passed away. And then in your example earlier, you have 3 kids and you leave, for easy math, $3 million to the oldest son, to him to divvy up. Each kid is thinking, okay, we each get $1 million. And that's not even close. That's not even close to what's going to happen. Yeah, and then the siblings aren't going to trust each other. Well, why aren't we getting the full $1 million? Well, because there's taxes. Well, why are we, there's all sorts of questions. It can be handled so much better. And so, this is a great subject.
Yeah, it's time to, like you said earlier, find someone you can trust that's impartial, that's out of the family, that's there, that can give you some good, solid advice, that it doesn't have the emotion put into it, but has this knowledge of the way that the beneficiaries and the trusts and the wills and the taxes work. And just real quick, speaking on taxes, a lot of times people are worried about maybe leaving money to the kids or to whomever because of the estate taxes. Not sure if you knew this or not, Eric, but they changed the laws a couple years back, 2017. We'll see how quickly they change the laws again. But basically, you don't pay estate taxes until your estate is bigger than about $11.5 million, which is quite a large dollar amount.
Yeah. Right? I'm not quite there yet. So and that's for a single person, right? So a married couple, it's like it's 22 million, right, or 23 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's huge, and no, I'm not even close to that, so I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah, well, that's it, and I think they maybe did that on purpose so that most folks don't have to worry about that estate idea. But a lot of times people say, "Oh, I'm worried about estate taxes or inheritance taxes." We're in Wisconsin. I don't know exactly when they got rid of this, but the idea of inheritance tax hasn't been around for years. But another misconception, I'll just ask you to see where you're at, Eric, is that how much money can you give to your kids every year? Like, what's the most you can give away?
I think if I remember right, I think gifting isn't it $10,000 per person per year?
I'm so happy you said that, and I promise everyone that was not a setup. But that's just about what everyone says. Because years back, the rule was that you could give only about $10,000 per year. Mm-hmm. Now it's up to $15,000, and actually that's not even a limit. Like, you can give whatever you want. The real rule is that once you hit that $15,000, we're here in 2019 recording this, but $15,000 is what that amount is right now. You go over by $1, all you do is fill out a tax form. And the whole point of the tax form is the government's checking to see, did you give away more than $11.5 million? Once you do, we'll start taxing you. But the $15,000 isn't even a limit. They'd love it if you gave away more than $11 million, because now you start paying the taxes on it. So you can tell your kids it's still $10,000, but that rules actually changes up to $15,000, and that's not even a maximum. You're not going to jail if you give away $15,001. All you got to do is fill out a tax form. It's not a big deal. But yeah, let your kids think it's still $10,000.
Yeah,
Don't want them asking for too much money.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jeremy, I just want to clarify something. We were talking about the $15,000 that you can give away each year to individuals, but then you brought up the $11.5 million again, and I thought that was just the estate amount that you could give away without it being affected by taxes. How does that play into the $15,000 per year?
Yep, you got it. So estate and gift taxes are really just the same system. An estate tax, or leaving money through your estate, that's just a gift you make after you die. And a gift is one that you do before you die. So they've got this lifetime situation of $11.5 million. That's roughly what the numbers are right now. We're saying roughly because it's been changing. It actually changes each year right now, and who knows what they'll do with the tax code in the future. But the idea is each year they kind of give you a little bit of leeway. You give your kid $15,000. They say, don't even tell us about it. You go over. They say, now you tell us about it. You fill out the form, and they're just starting to keep track of this because they figure if lifetime you've given away more than, in this case, $11.5 million, now they're going to start taxing you on it.
Got it.
So like we said earlier, what are the odds that as a couple, you're going to have more than $23 million that you give away either before you die or after you die? So a lot of people feel like there's this limit of $10,000 that I can give my kids. In reality, the new rules are $15,000 a year. And big deal if you fill out one extra tax form,
Yeah.
If you really want to give your kid $20,000, go ahead. Just tell your tax person, fill out the form like you're supposed to, and don't worry about it.
Yeah. Oh, outstanding. Yeah. Okay, that makes it really, really clear. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So we talked about what happens when you leave behind some money. Let's talk about what happens when you leave behind some bills. And a lot of those bills have to do with your responsibilities. And we use the word bills, but we're not truly talking about like, okay, you get a credit card bill the month after you die. What we're really talking about is these responsibilities that come in, right? When you were younger, before you hit retirement, you cared about your spouse and your kids, and what happens if you die too soon. Well, in retirement, even if the kids aren't at home, I hope they're not at home when you're in retirement, but you still have this responsibility to each other, to your spouse. And just because your money isn't coming in from a salary doesn't mean that your money will come in forever, right? If you die too soon, there's parts of your money, parts of that stuff that you'll be making that we helped you make decisions on back in the second step, that will change when the first person dies. So we call that the survivor gap. The idea is that there's almost definitely going to be less money coming in from other sources when there's one person compared to two. Now, if both of you are on Social Security, doesn't matter who dies first, the lower one goes away.
Got it.
A lot of people hear that and they say, well, I'm the lower person. I'll get brought up to my spouse at the higher amount. Yep, you're right. That's so awesome that the government does that, where they bring you up to the higher amount, but you still lost the lower amount.
Exactly.
Right? It's gone. A lot of times we see like $1,000 a month that's out the door, maybe even more when the first person passes away with Social Security. And with your pensions, a lot of times the default pension is what they call a 50% survivorship. So if you don't take some actions to sign up for a different situation, if you're getting $1,000, $2,000 a month from your pension, that might just drop in half. Now, hopefully you've got some different survivorship options, they're called. Hopefully you've made some choices, but that's what we're talking about here is what are the choices that you get to make with your pension that will make sure that survivor gap is as small as possible. So you make some of these choices ahead of time. Other choices like Social Security, you don't really get much of a choice on. And the thought is, let's figure out what is that survivor gap? What is it that the surviving spouse is going to be missing? And let's make sure that there's a plan, because you've got some responsibility to help out your spouse there, even if you're not around. And that's what we're talking about is those are the bills we're talking about is really more, the bills are going to start coming in more when there's less money after that first person dies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another big risk, big responsibility that comes in is what happens when you live too long. The longer you live, the more the stock market and inflation and interest rates will affect you. And what we see a lot of times is the longer you live, the worse your health gets.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say
your health
healthcare
gets,
is huge,
the worse your health gets, the higher healthcare costs are going to be. And a lot of times those are health costs that aren't coming in from your regular health insurance through Medicare, through your supplements. Those are things that a lot of people call long-term care. And I'm sure we'll get into a long-term care specific topic at some point in time. But the idea, again, too, is you need to have a plan, right? If you die too soon, there's going to be a survivor gap that might be there for a long, long time for your spouse. What is your plan? Let's have a plan for that risk of dying too soon. And if you live a long time, chances are pretty good your health will change. And let's figure out what that might look like in terms of cost, in terms of who might be caring for you, right? This is why it kind of all falls into this estate planning idea of what are you leaving behind? What kind of legacy are you leaving behind for people? And you ought to have a plan there too. And we're not saying that plan is buy insurance for both of those areas, but it could be part of it. Maybe the plan is you've set aside some extra money for these risks that are being there. But the idea is figure out what is at stake and create a plan to help kind of mitigate, be prepared for those situations.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. Nobody wants to leave their spouse or family in a situation where it's just absolutely, it's going to be terrible, over the next 5 to 10 years. I think everybody needs to have that plan.
Yeah. I hope the folks listening, if they haven't gone through this type of process or had the time to talk through what is it they want to leave behind, we're just going to summarize a couple things here quick for you and really encourage you to reach out to your advisor, find somebody that you can trust that can walk you through some of this.
Perfect.
And related to what we're talking about, the idea of an estate, it's what you want for both before and after you die, right? So it's not just the will, where do I, send my money to? It's what do you want for both before and after you die? And when it comes to these big risks, we feel that the two biggest risks in retirement are what if you die too soon? And if that happens, that survivor gap. Find out what your survivor gap is going to be and figure out how that's going to affect your spouse when that happens. Have a plan for that survivor gap. And then the other big risk is what if you live too long? Because chances are pretty good when you live too long, your health gets worse and your costs go up. And make sure you have a plan for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeremy, great podcast. Can you give us a sneak peek on what we're going to be covering next? Because this is part 5, so we're wrapping this up.
Wrapping it up, and one big piece of step 1 is when you're spending some money, it's going to be looking at your taxes, right? Taxes are going to be a cost in retirement. Sometimes it's part of your biggest cost in retirement. So we want to give you some ideas around tax planning. What is it you should be looking at to be prepared for? How do things change in retirement with taxes?
All right, I'll be looking forward to that. We'll get deep in the weeds on that one, I'm sure. There's lots to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we love talking about it too.
Oh, yeah. All right, Jeremy, thank you so much for your time again.
Thank you, Eric.
And thank you all for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast with Jeremy Keil. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Jeremy comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Keil Financial Partners, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. Click on the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit retirement-revealed.com to learn more. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Keil Financial Partners. Keil Financial Partners does not provide legal, accounting, or tax advice. Consult your attorney or tax professional. Representatives have general knowledge of the Social Security tenets. For complete details on your situation, contact the Social Security Administration. Keil Financial Partners is a part of the Thrivent Advisor Network, a registered investment advisor. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.